In this video, we're going to start systemic mycosis, which is the fungi and part of mycology. All of the following can cause pneumonia and can disseminate. So they can cause pneumonia, all of these fungi, and they can disseminate. All are caused by dimorphic fungi, which means that they can be cold at 20 degrees Celsius, and in cold they are going to be in mold form, and in heat they are going to be in yeast form. Only exception is coccidioids, which is a spherule, and it is not a yeast in tissue. Systemic mycosis can form granulomas like TB, and they cannot be transmitted person to person. Unlike TB, treatment is fluconazole or itraconazole for local infection and amphotericin B for systemic infection. So as long as the infection is local, you use azoles, and when it is systemic, you use amphotericin B. The first disease is histoplasmosis. Endemic location is Mississippi and Ohio River valleys. I have no idea about these. So histoplasmosis is in Mississippi and Ohio River valleys in the Midwest. They say this area is for histoplasmosis. The pathological features are macrophages filled with histoplasma, smaller than RBC. So this is a macrophage and it is filled with histoplasma, which is the fungus, and they have tuberculate mitochondria on culture. Sorry, macronidia on culture. What are macronidia? They are large multicellular spores produced by certain fungi, primary for asexual reproduction and dispersal. So the two important features are that the macrophage is filled with histoplasma and there is tuberculate micronidia on culture. This one is important. The unique signs and symptoms are palatal or tongue ulcers, splenomegaly, pancytopenia, and erythema nodosum. Histohides within macrophages associated with bird or bat droppings, example in caves, and diagnosis is via urine or serum antigen. I'd like to see the presentation of histoplasmosis. Patient. Mm. Okay, so this is the rash in histoplasmosis, um, which is the erythema nodosum, and this is how it looks like. Next, we have blastomycosis, which is present in eastern and central US and the Great Lakes. So, in Mississippi and Ohio River valleys, there was histoplasmosis, and blastomycosis is present in eastern and central US, and it is Great Lakes. Great Lakes is basically high yield for blastomycosis. The pathologic features are broad-based budding of blastomyces, same size as RBCs. So you can see a broad-based bud right here on the histology. Unique symptoms are inflammatory lung disease, disseminates to bone or skin, varicose lesion, may mimic SCCA, which is uh, squamous cell carcinoma. So this is how it presents when it is disseminated to bone and skin. This is known as a varicose lesion. Blastobuds broadly is a note they have made for the pathologic feature of blastomycosis. Next is coccidioidomycosis, which is again the only fungus that is a spherule and not a yeast in the tissue. It is present in southwestern US and California. So right here, this disease is endemic to southwestern US and California. Its pathology feature is spherule filled with endospores of coccidioids, which are much larger than RBCs. So basically, this spherule, which is filled with endospore of coccidioids, it disseminates to bone and skin and causes erythema nodosum, desert bumps, or multiform arthralgias, desert rheumatism. So desert bumps and desert rheumatism, these are new words for me, and they can cause meningitis as well. It is associated with dust exposure in endemic areas, example archaeological excavations and earthquakes. Next one is paracoccidioidomycosis, and it is endemic to Latin America. It has histologic features of budding yeast of peroxidiodes with captain's wheel formation, which is much larger than RBCs. They are continuously progressively increasing in size. Histoplasmosis was smaller than RBC. Blastomyces was same as RBC. Coccidioidomycosis was much larger than RBC, and paracoccidioidomycosis is much larger than RBC. Um, its symptoms are similar to that of blastomycosis, and it is greater in males than in females. Again, the symptoms of blastomycosis were inflammatory lung disease, disseminates to bone or skin, varicose lesion, and may make SCC. Paracoccidioidomycosis is similar to blastomycosis. Paracoccidioparasales with the captain's wheel all the way to Latin America. So this is a mnemonic you can use to remember this one. Again, blastomycosis in Ohio and Mississippi, histoplasmosis in the eastern and central US and in the Great Valleys, and coccidomycosis in the southwestern part of the US and California, and paracoccidioidomycosis in Latin America. Next, we have opportunistic fungal infections. The first one is Candida albicans. Alba means white. It is dimorphic, forms pseudohyphae and budding yeast at 20 degrees Celsius, and germ tubes at 37 degrees Celsius. So here are the pseudohyphae at 20 degrees Celsius, and this is a germ tube at 37 degrees Celsius. It is opposite to our rule of um, yeast in heat and cold in mold. It is cold in um, sorry, mold in heat and yeast in cold. So yeast at 20 degrees Celsius and germ tubes at 37 degrees Celsius. It is systemic or superficial fungal infection. It causes oral and esophageal thrush in immunocompromised, for example, the neonates, those taking steroids, diabetics, and AIDS. It causes vulvovaginitis in patients who are diabetic and are using antibiotics. It causes diaper rash. It causes infective endocarditis in people who inject drugs. It causes disseminated candidiasis in neutropenic patients, as host defense relies on phagocytes, and chronic mucocutaneous candidiasis as well. So, first of all, there is oral and esophageal thrush in the immunocompromised. Then there's vulvovaginitis in the diabetics and those using antibiotics. Then there's diaper rash and infective endocarditis in diaper rash in infants and infective endocarditis in people who inject drugs. Disseminated form in neutropenic patients, and chronic mucocutaneous candidiasis is a progressive form of the disease. The treatment is again oral fluconazole or topical azoles for vaginal, nystatin, azoles or really echinocandins for oral, and fluconazole, echinocandins, or amphotericin B for esophageal or systemic disease. So you use fluconazole or topical azoles for vaginal and esophageal, but you use nystatin for or really echinocandins for oral. It is again my first time hearing about echinocandins. They are fungistatic against some molds, aspergillus but not fusarium and rhizopus, modestly or minimally active against dimorphic fungi. Okay, so really we use echinocandins for the treatment of um, oral candidiasis. The next is Aspergillus fumigatus. The A is for acute angle of 45 degrees of branching of septate hyphae. As in shown in this picture, this is an acute angle septation of the hyphae. It causes invasive aspergillus in immunocompromised patients. Sorry, aspergillosis in immunocompromised patients, especially those with neutrophil dysfunction. Example CGD, because aspergillus is catalase positive, can cause aspergillomas in pre-existing lung cavities, especially after TB infection. Some species of aspergillus produce aflatoxins that induce TP53 mutation leading to hepatocellular carcinoma. This one is important. TP53 mutation that leads to hepatocellular carcinoma. Treatment is voriconazole or echinocandins, second line. Next is a very important disease known as allergic bronchopulmonary aspergillosis. It is HSV type 1 reaction response to aspergillus growing in lung mucus associated with asthma and CF, may cause bronchiectasis and eosinophilia. This one is an important one. So aspergillus is basically causing aspergillosis in immunocompromised patients, aspergillomas, which are granulomas in the lung, and aflatoxins, produced by Aspergillus flava and other species, and they are treated by voriconazole. And another disease that they cause is allergic bronchopulmonary aspergillosis. This was invasive aspergillosis, and this is allergic bronchopulmonary aspergillosis or ABPA, which is associated with asthma and CF and may cause bronchiectasis and eosinophilia. Next is Cryptococcus neoformans, which is 5 to 10 micrometer with narrow budding. It is heavily encapsulated yeast, and it is important to remember this point because this is the first yeast that is encapsulated. It is not dimorphic. It has positive PAS staining. It is found in soil, pigeon droppings, acquired through inhalation with nematogenous dissemination to meninges, highlighted with India ink, and it produces a clear hollow on the India ink. Here, it remains transparent on the India ink. And musical mean, red in a capsule. The detection techniques for Cryptococcus neoformans are particularly important. Lattice agglutination test detects polysaccharide capsular antigen and is more sensitive and specific. Causes cryptococcosis or cryptococcosis, which can manifest with meningitis, pneumonia, or encephalitis, which are sobobelians in the brain, primarily in the immunocompromised. These three are very high yield for cryptococcus infections. There's going to be meningitis, there's going to be pneumonia or encephalitis, which are sobubble lesions in the brain. It is treated again with amphotericin B plus flucytosine, which is followed by fluconazole for cryptococcal meningitis. The order is important. First is amphotericin B, and then is flucytosine, which is followed by fluconazole for cryptococcal meningitis. Then we have Mucor and Rhizopus species, which are irregular, broad, and non-separate hyphae, branching at wide angles, or we say at 90 degrees. It causes mucormycosis, mostly in patients with DKA or neutropenia, for example, leukemia. Inhalation of spores causes fungi to proliferate in blood vessel walls and penetrate in the cribriform plate and enter the brain. Rhinocerebral and frontal lobe abscess. There's also cavernous sinus thrombosis, headache, facial pain, black necrotic scar on the face, and may have cranial nerve involvement. Treatment is surgical debridement and amphotericin B or isavuconazole, obviously. Then we have Pneumocystis jirovecii, which is yeast-like fungus that causes pneumocystis pneumonia, PCP, a diffuse interstitial pneumonia, which is shown here. It is an interstitial pneumonia, and an important thing about it is that it is asymptomatic. And interstitial pneumonia means that there are going to be no consolidation on the chest X-ray. The most you're going to see is something called broken glass appearance. Most infections are asymptomatic. Immunosuppression, example, AIDS predisposes to disease, diffuse bilateral ground glass opacities on chest imaging with pneumatoceles. These are the pneumatoceles, which are cysts in the lung. And ground glass opacities, as I said, are the most you're going to find on the chest X-ray. Diagnosed by bronchoalveolar lavage or lung biopsy. Disc-shaped yeast seen on methenamine silver stain of lung tissue or with fluorescent antibody. Treatment of prophylaxis is TMP SMX, pentamidine, and dapsone. Prophylaxis as single agent or treatment in combination with TMP. And there's itovercune. These are new drugs, dapsone and itovercune. Start prophylaxis when CD4 positive cell count drops to less than 200 cells per millimeter cube in people living with HIV. So that's when you start the prophylaxis. TMP SMX is used basically, and in patients who have sulfatide allergies, you can use pentamidine. Dapsone is used either alone in prophylaxis or in combination with TMP, and itovercune is also used. Then we have Sporothrix schenckii that causes sporotrichosis. It is a dimorphic fungus, exists as cigar-shaped yeast at 37 degrees Celsius in the human body and is hyphae with spores in the soil. Or conidia. It lives in vegetation when spores are traumatically introduced into the skin, typically via horn or rose gardener's disease. It causes local pustular ulcer with nodules along draining lymphatics, and it is known as ascending lymphangitis. Uh, where is the picture? Yes. It progresses in this fashion, like um, um, downwards to above, ascending lymphangitis. Disseminated disease possible in immunocompromised host. Treatment is itraconazole or potassium iodide only for cutaneous or lymphocutaneous. And think of a rose gardener who smokes a cigar and bought. This was it for our fungus part. We will do parasitology in the next video. Bye.